I think we're ready. Ready,
Let's roll.
you're ready.
I'm good, man.
Let's talk about fishing.
Let's talk about it.
Here today with Marc Gioeli of Cats on the Rock Guide Service, and we're going to talk about catfish today, which is something new, exciting, and different for me. I don't do a lot of catfishing, a little bit once in a while, and I'd like to learn more about it. We got the right guy here to talk to us about that today. And before we just kind of jump into catfishing and just kind of covering all the basics and so forth, just kind of put a shout out here. Just do appreciate you guys watching, appreciate the subscriptions, the comments, the shout outs, and so forth. Appreciate so many of you, liking, subscribing, watching us on YouTube, but also on the other platforms. We're doing the audio podcast now with Apple Podcast, Spotify. Appreciate you guys and girls, and appreciate all the support. It's a lot of fun doing this, and I enjoy meeting people, talking with people, and learning more about fishing and sharing it with you. But with that being said, let's jump into talking about some fishing. So, Marc Gioeli, Cats on the Rock Guide Service. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got started in fishing, and
I got hooked on fishing with bluegill when I was little.
Okay.
And I fished for bass, fished for striper. Catfish is what got my heart, I guess.
Okay.
So I've been fishing for them for the last 12 years. I predominantly fish High Rock Lake. I love that lake. And main reason is because it's only 40 minutes from the house versus driving further down. But my dad got me into fishing, and I mean that's pretty much it. That's why I love fishing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think catfishing is one of the types of fishing that I started with. Growing up in Ohio, and it's kind of everywhere. Pretty much everywhere has.
Oh yeah, it's a grown sport for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we'll talk about catfish today, but I also know you fish for some other stuff too, and maybe that's something we can talk about in the future. But I'm
a big smallmouth bass fisherman.
Yeah.
I don't largemouth bass fish too much anymore, but when it gets hot down here, going up to the river is a good place to cool off, and it's just a fun time, just something to unwind from catfishing.
Sure, absolutely.
Once the season fires back up, that's my drug.
That's something else that I don't know a lot about, but I'd like to know more. So maybe a later time we can pick your brain on that.
Yeah, we can do a new river podcast. That's
I like the sound of that already.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about. So you said you primarily fish High Rock Lake, and you do guided trips on High Rock Lake.
I started in February.
Okay.
It's something that's been on the back burner for a long time, and I'm not getting any younger, so
okay.
I finally decided, and all of that really just stems from two things. One, I've really gotten to the point where I enjoy figuring the fish out. Catching's still fun, but putting all the pieces together to find a fish. And then I take a lot of friends fishing, and just wanted to kind of extend that out to other folks. It's not really a money-driven thing. It's just a passion of getting people outdoors. Watching a kid hook into a big fish is a lot of fun. Watching someone who never catches a big fish is a lot of fun, and that's probably the main reason, the reason why I do it. So, but yeah. So I do guide, and I fun fish. I have a son that loves. I have 3 boys.
Oh wow!
One that really loves to fish, so he tags along. He's been fishing since he's been shorter than this table. So he's a freshman in high school now.
All right.
But
and what's his name?
Camden.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
He fished some tournaments with me and things like that. So,
awesome.
But he's getting to that age where, hanging out with the buddies is. Getting that age, so
he needs to find buddies that like to catch catfish.
Yeah, he's gonna be chasing those girls here pretty soon.
Yeah.
But
well, you get chasing the girls, you catch one, and then there is no more fish.
Yeah, no more for a while anyway.
Well, let's talk about High Rock Lake. So I know that's where you're spending, the bulk of your time. I mean, what is it? I mean, other than its closeness, what do you like about High Rock Lake, and what makes that a good destination for?
Well, I would say High Rock, relative to the rest of the Yadkin chain, is the shallowest of the lakes, which, in my opinion, makes it easier to target fish, to understand what the fish are doing. I like the fact that we're connected to the river directly.
Okay.
That opens up some options as well. High High Rock is a great fishery. I mean, we have everything from largemouth striper, blue catfish, flathead catfish, channel catfish, a huge crappie population. So there's an abundance of bait at High Rock as well, makes it a good fishery. High Rock can be a challenging fishery at the same time because of water fluctuations up and down, constantly changing things on top of all the other things that we have to keep up with, whether it's barometric pressure, weather swings. High Rock can be the muddiest out of all the lakes at times because it takes the brunt of all the silt and everything coming from upriver. So, but those things, in my opinion, I think are what make High Rock special.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that as far as catfish. I mean, there's a huge forage base, and I mean, those catfish got a lot to eat. So, I mean, not only, I mean, we've got, the threadfin shad, the gizzard shad, but catfish eat, I mean, anything.
If they can fit it in their mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not uncommon if we're flathead fishing at night to fish with 10-inch, 11-inch live crappie.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I know guys, I don't particularly do it, but I know guys that fish with live largemouth bass.
Really?
Huge sunfish.
Oh, wow.
So,
are you allowed to do that?
As long as they're caught legally.
Okay.
With rod and reel.
Okay.
Yeah, largemouth bass you can fish with. Any of the fish you catch legally you can fish with.
Gotcha.
At High Rock Lake. So, but yeah, it's if you've never caught a 40-pound flathead, the mouth on those things are unreal. So there's not many of the game fish that are safe. I mean, they'll eat blue catfish too.
Wow.
So
So speaking of that, and that's just kind of a random question. You're talking about catching a 40-pound flathead. I mean, what's the potential for like catching a big flathead on High Rock? I mean, what's a big, or an average, or a big, or like how big do they get?
I mean, I would say we say anything over 30 pounds is a good flathead. But I mean, I know friends personally that have caught them up to 70 pounds.
Really?
Yeah, there were some blue catfish caught this year in the 60-pound range as well.
Really?
Which 10 years ago that wasn't even a thing. So the blue catfish in High Rock Lake has really started to take over.
Right,
and,
I've noticed a lot.
It's starting to affect the flathead fishery at High Rock.
Okay.
So do I still think that there's a 70-pound flathead in High Rock? I do. I don't think as many as there used to be.
So do you think the blues are kind of taking over? I mean, you think? I mean,
without scientifically telling you that.
Yeah. I mean, your opinion.
I do think. I think blues when they get into waters, they do become the apex predator.
They seem to be pretty aggressive, and they
super
eat
aggressive.
Everything, and
super aggressive. I mean, I've caught 4-pound blue cats that'll eat a sunfish that big.
Wow.
I mean, it almost looks like they couldn't get it in their mouth. But they're super aggressive, which makes them fun to catch too.
Yeah.
And there's an abundance of blues in High Rock right now.
So I've heard. And I think I was talking to Tony Sherem here a while back, and he said, you're talking about catfish just eating anything. He was saying that he's seen, and I believe he said it was blue catfish, but he said with a 3-pound white bass stuck in its mouth, like where it was just flopping on the surface because it was struggling to get it down. Yep. And he said he's seen that on more than one occasion. And
those stripers that you guys caught, those are more than fair game for the blue catfish on Baden Lake.
Yeah. I hate to hear that.
which is funny.
But yeah.
Because you guys were catching those blue cats with the stripers.
Right, yeah.
And that's not uncommon. The misconception with catfish or by the folks that don't fish for them are they're trash fish.
Right.
When in reality, a juvenile blue catfish will focus on whatever he can get his mouth on. But once they get to a certain age, they primarily become live fish eaters. And they'll follow bait schools, stripers, in open water. I mean, you'll catch them. Right now at baiting, like you said, you can catch them out in the middle, suspended 10 foot. I mean, I catch them out of High Rock. You can catch them under floats. 10 foot and 30 foot of water.
Yeah.
So,
man, that's awesome.
Just things to open up your mind when you're targeting them. It's not the old throw a piece of dough bait out there and hope for the best.
Right. Yeah. I know as a kid it was catching catfish just using chicken livers.
Sure.
And like chicken livers don't naturally occur in the
No.
in the lake. They're feeding on something else. But
No.
yeah,
I've fished for everything, and I will tell you, to consistently catch trophy size 30+ pound catfish has been the biggest challenge of any fishery and any fishing I've done.
So let's talk a little bit about, like, take us through, if you want to, this, like, the seasons. And you can start, if you want to start with winter, you want to start with, like, right now we're in summer. Like, you know, what's the fishing like? Or
We'll start with January.
So, yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
I think that depending in our area of the country, I particularly in January, February, March, I like to fish shallow.
Okay.
Now certain lakes at certain times of year, and depending on what the weather does, but typically for an average pattern here, I mean, it's not uncommon to catch catfish in the wintertime in 5 foot of water.
Oh wow. Okay,
Big,
I would not
big
have
catfish.
guessed that.
With that being said, at High Rock in particular, you can go and catch them at Swearing Creek in 5 foot, and go catch them at 30 foot down at Panther Creek all on the same day. It just depends on what body of water you're covering.
Okay.
And that pattern will typically last January, February, March. And this is all relative to water temperature and what the bait's doing. You know, that's pre-spawn. As we get into April, May, a lot of fish will start migrating to the upper end of the lake. Not all of them. When I say this, it's not every fish, because you'll have fish that are going to stay in the lower end of the lake all year. This is just kind of bulk, you know. But you'll notice a lot of guys, and even myself included, you'll start notching up towards the river. Not to say necessarily in April all the fish are going to be up in the river, but that's kind of the natural progression. But I'll focus a lot of my efforts April, May, and we'll get to June in a minute, kind of on the upper stretches or in the back of some of the bigger creeks. Is a good place. Like I was telling you, June at High Rock Lake. And I mean, unless you want to catch channel cats all day, June is a great time to work on your boat. That's
Okay.
You know, between the spawn and the pleasure boaters and, you know, all that kind of stuff going on. It's just a great time to get some stuff done. And then once July starts to hit, matter of fact, kind of right now, all my last, I would say 4 trips out, we've been catching nothing but females.
Really?
Well, because they'll start to spawn, lay their eggs, and they'll be the first ones off. Males will stay behind, which makes sense. So, you know, 4 trips, I haven't caught any males. So they're still kind of finishing up. And then hopefully, you know, by now, in the next couple weeks, they'll start to. So spawn will last for blues the month of June, beginning of July. And then flatheads typically will come a little bit behind that. Same thing. Females will go on, do their thing, and the males will stay behind. A lot of times you'll catch fish in July, August, and you'll notice they're really beat up, chunks of flesh missing, scratches, and that's all from spawning.
Really?
They get to be a little violent.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so I can't speak on to kind of what that is, but there's some videos online that folks have posted on YouTube, and you can see 2 big blues locked in, one's head and the other's mouth, and just kind of fighting for the right to spawn like you see on any other National Geographic show. Okay. So
that's crazy. Okay.
So it's rough. And then, you know, post-spawn bite, you know, when you start getting into August, September, I'll break it down to that. You know, that's that post-spawn bite. Water's still really hot, so fish haven't really settled into any one particular pattern. They're just, they want to feed. You know, High Rock, if anybody knows what a thermocline is, High Rock can probably have one of the worst ones, depending on water flow. Like we're in a point right now where, you know, anything less than 12 to 16 feet, you're just not going to catch anything. There's just no oxygen down there. So you'll deal with that for a little while. Once you get into like end of September, October, November, as water starts to cool, it's kind of that typical pattern. It's where's the bait? What's the bait doing? You know, you'll get bait will stack up in the mouths of the creeks, find it in some of the bigger cuts, some of the bigger coves. As the water continues to cool, you'll find those fish kind of back up in the creeks. You still get some on the main body. And then once, like I said, you get back around to January, November, December, January, and it's kind of back to that, you know, fish are kind of all over the lake. You can catch them, like I said, from Swearing down to Panther. You can catch them trolling still, you can catch them anchored. I personally prefer to anchor fish.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certain times of year, like right now, where you're better off because fish aren't moving as much when it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
So the more baits you can drag
Okay.
and cover more water, change your depths, bait size, how fast you're going, things like that make a big difference this time of year.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about that, like some of the techniques that you use. I mean, you're fishing from a boat typically, and sounds like you're doing, maybe depending on the time of year and what the fish are doing and what the bait's doing, like you're employing like different techniques. Like, I mean, you maybe just talk a little bit about some of your like different ways that you target them. Like
so predominantly for me, I either anchor fish, and I normally fish with like 10 rods.
Okay.
And just for an example, if we're fishing in super muddy water,
Mm-hmm.
I typically will like to do Carolina rig and keep my bait closer to the bottom. Not so much because the catfish need to be near the bottom, but bait fish will relate to something, whether it's the bottom structure. So I like to keep my bait where the fish are at. If the water's clear, normally Santee rigs do really well just to keep your bait up.
Okay.
And if you're not sure what Santee rig is, it's basically your weight with a leader. It could be, 18 to 24 inches depending. Peg float.
Right.
About a 3-inch, 4-inch gap. And then I normally use 8 to 10 aught triple threat circle hooks.
Okay.
And then that just kind of helps keep the bait up off the bottom. Those typically for me are my go-tos for anchor fishing. If we get some really heavy current, some big rains, I switch to a 3-way rig, which is basically a 3-way swivel, a leader line with a weight at the bottom, as opposed to being in line like a Carolina rig, and then another line out, so that way the bait has more freedom to flow in the current. But normally I don't really use those at high rock unless we got a lot of current. And then trolling, kind of same exact thing. They make drifting weights, and you can Google that.
Like
There's 10 years ago, a lot of guys were making them themselves. Shock cord or shrink tube or weights. I used to make my own, but there's so many people making them now. It's just easier to order them.
Right.
I don't have a preference.
Sure.
I don't have any that are better than the other. But anyway, those will help keep you from getting caught up on any structure. And then it's kind of the same as the Santee rig, just a long leader with a float and then hook. But now they've added, there's rattles and beads, and I keep mine pretty simple. I'm a big believer if you find fish and you have fresh bait, we can talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
Catfish aren't going to be too picky. You know what I mean? They're not They're not gonna care if you have an orange bead or a green bead. They're gonna be more concerned on what's at the business end of your rig. So,
big chunk of fresh meat.
But those are pretty much my techniques, and I'll tell you, for me, just fishing that lake for so long, you kind of get the sense when you anchor up in a spot what the fish are doing. If they're on the move, you get bit pretty quick. If you're not getting bit, they're not moving around as much. Could be a number of things. Could be cold fronts, barometric pressure. Like I said, high rock is notorious for, you may go fish on Monday, and it'll be this high, and you come back Tuesday morning, they dropped it 3 feet.
Right, yeah.
And the bait and the fish, they all react to that. So, but that's pretty much my my techniques.
I like that. I think you mentioned a minute ago about bait. What's some of the options that maybe you would throw out?
So bait's one of those things. I want to say it's seasonal. High rock has got a huge. You can never go wrong with gizzard shad. But one thing about a catfisherman, or at least in my opinion, it makes you good at catching all the species of fish. Because there's been days where you'll throw gizzard shad out and they won't touch it. But if you have white perch, they'll tear it up. In the springtime, crappie's a big bait. So understanding how to catch crappie helps if you can do that. Like I said, personally, I fish with largemouth bass, bluegill, sunfish. Those are probably the 4 big ones that I predominantly fish with. And if I had one of those to choose year round, I would stick with gizzard shad. And that all boils down to I'm big on confidence. I'm not saying what I'm saying is right, But what you
works,
have confidence with and what's put fish in the boat is what I suggest you stick with. I know guys that strictly fish with perch, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's it's what works. So I will say that no sunscreens, don't wash your hands in a bunch of fancy soaps. Be careful pumping gas. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being successful with what's going on bait wise. And then it's, I always try to catch my bait. Like if I have a trip, I get up at 2, 3 in the morning, and I go catch my bait like 2 hours before I'm gonna take people out.
Okay.
I don't let it. I try not to let it touch the ice. I try to put it in a plastic bag of some sort to keep it from touching. Just that ice has chlorine in it. Again, it may not make a difference, but as sophisticated as the senses of a catfish are, you never know. There's some days I don't think they care. But maybe on a day where the bite's tough, maybe those little things make a difference. Right. Yeah. But I'm big on that. When the water tends to cool a little bit, I like to catch my bait live and pull it straight out of the bait tank and use it as opposed to have it been on ice. Okay. I think it bleeds better, puts out more scent. When I go from the bait tank to the cutting board to the water, it's kind of like you catching a flounder. Yeah. Cooking it and eating it in the same hour. Versus freezing it and then taking it out. Sure, yeah. We all know which one tastes better.
The fresh one for sure.
And I don't think the fish think any different. I think they know what the good stuff is. So
yeah,
that makes sense. Just emphasize on bait is everybody gets caught up in the rods, and the reels, and the line, and the rigs. The bait is, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important things you can put time and effort into. So
I think a lot of us grew up fishing for catfish and just whatever the smelliest, stinkiest thing, and I think with that we get this idea that catfish aren't that picky. Like, well, if it stinks, goodness sake, that's what they like. So we don't think about that there's certain smells that might be off-putting to catfish, like that they pick it up and they say, or they they swim by it and they're like, okay, this is not normal. Like this smells like sunscreen. This smells like chlorine. It smells like like we think of them as like Mikey, they'll eat anything, and that's maybe not exactly true.
Well, you hear, and I'm not knocking. There's got a lot of guys that fish with chicken, and that is a tried and true bait. It's a good bait. Yeah. And then you get into like the things like the Jello and in the mix with that is that Jello is an animal based product. Okay. And it just puts off additional amino acids, and I believe that's what the fish pick up on. I don't think they care that it's cherry Jello. It just, to us, what people have to realize is what we see, like the dough baits and the stinky baits, those smell nothing like that under the water. Okay. It's like anything else. People make those baits because they want to make $1. So if your mindset is the smelliest, nasty thing catches fish, and I'm the guy making smelly, nasty things, I want mine to be the worst, so you'll buy it when you open up the container and go, man, this is awful. Yeah. But in reality, those smells, same with like color and everything else, it all changes in a fish's perspective. Sure. So you always got to keep that in mind. It's always a good rule of thumb for me I'm not trying to fool the fish. If there's crappie in there, they're eating crappie. If there's white perch in there, they're eating white perch. If there's gizzard shad, they're eating. Right. But things like that work good for channel catfish at certain times of the year. Fishing to me is like it's just like it's a nonstop 8th grade science fair project. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And if you take the same processes that go into your science fair project, you apply those to fishing. Yeah. If the first 5 things aren't working, just change one. Maybe you're fishing in 20 foot. Right. Maybe you need to go to 10. Yeah. So like picking a variable and changing that variable. Yeah, because there's so many. There's some we can't control, but then some we can, or at least affect our decision making when we head to the lake. That's a good thought. Let me ask you the $1 million question. We talk about this different guests that we have, but what's your opinion on things like barometric pressure, moon phase? I hear some guys like striper guys, they're all about moon phase, and I think there's something to it myself. But I was just curious about with the catfishing world, if you guys see that or. My belief is somewhere on the lake, there's some fish that are feeding. when things get tough. Matter of fact, I'll give you an example. About 2 weeks ago, I took some guys out. On Monday, we put 20 fish in the boat, no problem. Tuesday, the following day, fish were in the same spot. We probably fished 12 different spots and did a bunch of different things, and finally put something together in the last hour and a half and caught fish.
Wow.
So I do believe that all those things play a role. I mean, barometric pressure is pretty much a given. I mean, that's pressure exerted on our bodies naturally. So if anybody knows kind of the anatomy of a fish and what swim bladders are,
right,
they have to regulate those based off of what Mother Nature's giving them.
Okay.
So they're either gonna go deeper in the water to offset that, or they're gonna come higher in the water column to offset that. But really, I don't think, and you also got to keep it in mind that the bigger fish aren't going to be as affected as the bait fish. So a lot of times it's, what are the bait fish doing? Bait fish are going to feel that a lot worse.
Oh, okay.
Than your big fish. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
okay. if it causes the bait fish to push deep or hug structure, your game fish aren't going to be far away from what's going on. Just again, it's one of the million variables to think about when you're out there.
Sure.
Moon phases. Me personally, if I'm fishing at night and there's a full moon, for me personally, I haven't done as good when it's darker out at night. And I don't know if it's the moonlight gives the bait fish a little bit better visibility. They can sense when the game fish are coming, when the predatory fish are coming. I don't know.
So you're saying full moon you don't do as well?
I don't do as well.
Okay.
And I say that like if I'm predominantly flathead fishing, I've done better and caught bigger flatheads when it's like no moon or a skinny moon.
Okay. Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, do you do like a lot of night fishing, or are you mostly a daytime guy, or?
In my younger years, I really like night fishing.
Yeah.
But probably coming up here in August, we'll start to really go after some flatheads. I think this time of year you do better at night. I'm a shallow water at night, like foot and a half, 2 foot of water.
Oh wow!
As big a bait and a lot of patience. Like I'm the kind of person like I'll sit on a spot for 2 hours if I feel good about it. If I know that that's a good spot. So I feel like bigger. This is talking about flatheads. I feel like bigger flatheads will sit in a deep hole or ditch away from, like, there's a particular cove in High Rock and it's loaded with bait. It's been that way for the last 3 weeks. But out the mouth of it, it drops down to 20 foot.
Okay.
This cove can go all the way back up to 4 foot.
Okay.
And I've sat back in there on numerous occasions and just put baits along that bank. And most of the time within 2 hours, we'll get a decent flathead. So I think those fish come out of deep water and they get up in the shallows and they start hunting at night. And I think it's a matter of like, it's kind of like deer hunting. Okay. If I feel good about my spot and it has all the things that a flathead wants, I'm going to put my money on that he's going to cruise through there. Yeah. We fished, my son and I fished the tournament down at Tillery in May. And we finished third and caught big fish at the tournament. And that same strategy, just got on some stuff we felt like flatheads would move to, and waited it out and ended up catching a 47 or 48 pound flathead.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's a lot of my bigger flatheads have come with a lot of patience. Well, I mean, and that's just like anybody I take that wants to catch a big fish. That's just especially flatheads. Blues I think are a little bit easier, but those big flatheads just take patience unless you hit them right in the head.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Now, some types of fishing, and like the other day, I was talking to Chris Miller. He's a tournament crappie fishing guy, and like he's super. Like he says, it's like super important. Like making noise and stealth and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything like that with catfish? I mean, do you really have to avoid like making racket and all that sort of thing, or do you feel like that makes any difference? Or
so I kind of look at it two ways. If I'm fishing shallow water, I do try to make an extra effort when I drop an anchor or I'm walking around on the boat to try and be as quiet as I can, to not disturb the area. With that being said, if I'm targeting a 30 or 40 pound fish, he doesn't have much to be scared of in the lake. And I think on the flip side of that, sometimes that noise may draw their attention.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Striper fishing. Matter of fact, I took a guide trip with a guy one time, and he took a old pool cue out. And he started beating the bottom of his boat.
Right.
And I was like, what the heck is this dude doing?
Yeah.
Well, that was his whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was those the bigger fish that don't really have any predators, they're able to come investigate.
Right. There's no fear of something's going to eat me. It's something's going on, and I might find something to eat.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if I'm in shallow water, those fish can be skittish. And I'll give you another example. Is a lot of times if we're trolling and we're using planer boards, you know, I'll normally fish with 2 planers on each side and 3 lines straight behind the boat. But I'll put my 2 furthest planer boards out, almost spool my rods.
Okay.
As far out away from the boat as I can, just so as I'm going straight, any noise I might be made, whether it's the transducer, trolling motor, somebody drops something, those fish will tend to want to swim out of the way. And, you talk to guys that have live scope that have tried to creep up on bigger fish. There's only so much space they're going to give before they know what's up.
Yeah.
So with those baits being further out to the side of the boat, if you spook those fish out, it just increases your odds of coming in contact with one of those bigger fish. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything that maybe that we haven't talked about that I haven't set you up to say, or anything that you think would be helpful, useful?
I think a lot of folks get caught up in the rod and reel deal. I think that
got to have the fancy,
I think
$5.
I think catfishing as a sport was always intended to just be a relaxing sport, and it's changed over the last couple of years. But I think equipment wise, we didn't talk too much about that. But you know, I started out with ugly sticks. I still have them, and they're great rods. But you know, the manufacturers now, the Mad Cats and the Big Cat Fever guys, they're comparable rods, but something that'll throw a little bit heavier weight.
Okay.
But you know, as far as rods, I fish personally with PC Fun Chaos 50 reels. I've had them for 3 years. They're $50 a piece.
Right.
And they've been put through the ringer. Big fish, little fish, lots of fish, beat up. So, you know, I just tell folks listening that maybe just getting into it, you know, don't feel like you have to go and have a $200 rod and reel setup to get into the sport, you know.
Yeah, like you can. I mean, it's not. But it's not gonna. I mean, it's just. Yeah, you don't. If you just want to get started, I mean, you can start with what you got almost.
Put your time and effort into learning the fish.
Yeah.
And then you can go. Then you can go from there. You know.
Sure.
But I think other than that, man, I think for just basic catfishing at High Rock Lake,
that's good.
There's a whole plethora of other things we could discuss. You know,
that's probably true, but
for an icebreaker.
No, that's probably good for today. I think that gives us some good basics and some good things to know. You know, like if somebody's from out of town, they want to come fish or whatever, which they're already used to fishing. Some of these tips could really help put them on some fish. Another thing that they could do, and we'll just kind of end with this, is maybe like somebody wants to book a trip. Maybe somebody wants just to book a trip with you.
Sure.
Kind of take all of the guesswork out of the equation.
Sure.
So how should a person get a hold of you, and what kind of trips do you offer? And
absolutely. So we have a website, catsontherockguideservice.com. I would probably say go there. Has contact information, phone numbers, trip rates, and we do 4, 6, and 8 hour trips all year long.
Okay.
But yeah, and there's reports and stuff on there. So, and I try when I take people out. I try to teach them as much as I can. Questions. What are you doing? What are you using? So it's not like this big secret adventure.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you blindfold them, put them in the car, drive them to an undisclosed location.
Yeah. Don't take your phone out. But I'm in the belief I've had a lot of people help me along the way.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by help, I'm not talking about, hey man, go to these waypoints and drop a line, but just techniques or maybe challenging my way of thinking. Things like that are really helpful in the fishing world because That's really kind of what gets you to grow.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the point. I mean, that's like why we do this. That's why we do the podcast, is to help people. I mean, we're not sharing pins and waypoints, but a lot of times that's not what's going to help you anyway.
It's not.
If you don't know what to do when you get there, it's not going to help. So
well, and fish are moving.
Yeah.
You know, and then like I was telling you before we started, I've marked big fish in the same spot for 3 weeks, and they could care less what I'm putting down there.
Yeah.
And that's part of fishing.
That is part of it. Yeah.
It's you know, and High Rock Lake is one of those lakes. It's not a huge lake, so it's not like, you know, if I take a picture, like people kind of know where it's just the time of year. It's just time on the water.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. It really is.
Well, really, I mean, you hear a lot of people say that, and it sounds so vanilla, but you really do learn. And this isn't just catfishing. This is all fishing. I've learned more from a terrible day of fishing than I do from one where I'm putting fish in the boat left and right.
Yeah.
Those bad days really force you to evaluate everything. You know, with just one more small thing. And this is just for, again, maybe folks that are getting started, but get you an app where you can track. I did it for about 2 years.
Okay.
Religiously. And I tracked everything on my trips. Water temperature, what they were doing as far as releasing water, temperature, barometric pressure, moon phases, what I used for bait, how big the bait was. Any variable I can make a note, and it seems cumbersome. But by doing that, you'll start to really kind of hone in, like, you know, in June, not June, but, you know, in January, this kind of really paid off. And then, you know, you go out again and you try those same things in January and then you're able to kind of start patterning fish, which is really what that's really the key, you know.
Yeah.
And that's whether you're crappie fishing or striper fishing.
No, I think that could be good no matter. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a lot of work, and I'm not saying, like, I don't do it anymore, but it really helped me when I wanted to learn the fish and what they were doing. And I spent more of my time and effort on that and analyzing that stuff than I did, you know, all the other stuff.
No, that's a good point. Appreciate you sharing that, and that's something that could be very helpful. I mean, whether you're keeping a journal, like some people keep a notebook, and they just
there's apps on the cell phone now.
I mean,
you can keep them, and then you just got to look them up.
Sure.
And you know, they keep it all on your phone, so you can take it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Marcus, just a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah, man.
Talking about catfishing. This was great. I really enjoyed this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, now we'll post Marc's information in the description down below. We'll also link, because you've got a YouTube channel too, don't you?
Yeah, I do YouTube and Facebook and
YouTube, Facebook.
Yeah.
So we'll link those down below. If you're listening on the audio form of the podcast, I'm not sure I can link it down below, but you can definitely look them up. Just go to Facebook. You can look up Cats on the Rock Guide Service, or just go to the website, catsontherockguideservice.com.
Yep.
And reach out to Marc, book a trip, look at the reports.
Yep.
And so anyway, with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Appreciate you watching.